everybody, welcome to our masterclass series, the first one of 2015. I am Susan Riley, founder of educationcloset.com, and I'm so excited to welcome you all here tonight. We do have an online chat area, so if you wouldn't mind, as you enter into the room, please add your name and where you're from over in our chat bar. I'm going to be taking a look at that periodically throughout the presentation tonight, but we do have a lot to get through. So I may just kind of try to hold off on that until towards the end, and we're going to get to some of your questions live at the end of our segment tonight. We are live from 8 until 9, so we do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock. I want to make sure that we're valuing your time. If you've never attended one of our masterclass events before, first of all, welcome, but secondly, we hold these as a series throughout the fall and the spring, each and every year, and they're free. They're absolutely free to sign up for, and we have them over in the events section on Education Closet. You can sign up for anything that interests you. We have our spring series up now, and just like this, you'll be able to see the live presentation, kind of talk with others from around the country who are dealing with similar questions about these topics, and we just really feel very passionately that you all deserve this kind of professional development. So at the end of tonight, you will receive a certificate for professional development hours for 1.5 hours of PD for attending. And if there's anything tonight in the presentation that you find valuable, that you want to kind of save and use for your own resources or use, there is a resource guide that you can download. It's available over in the pop-in section, but hold off downloading it until the end because I have something special that I want to share with you at the end. So I don't want you to go ahead and purchase it just yet. But again, that is something that's completely up to you. You don't need to purchase it, but if you feel like it would be valuable to you, it's over there for $15. Not a big deal. Just want to let you know that if that's something, if you're looking at these slides going, oh, I really want that to be able to use in my own classroom, that's where you can get it. So tonight we're talking about standards-based grading. And this is a really hot topic right now. It's actually been around for a while. Marzano wrote the book on this a while back, and it's kind of resurged in popularity with districts, especially when we're talking about teacher evaluation systems. So we're going to talk about tonight what it is, what the implications are in an arts classroom, and also how you can leverage that if you're looking at arts integration, which is something that we really specialize in over at Ed Closet, how you can utilize standards-based grading to kind of provide equitable grading for both the classroom teacher and the arts teacher. So that's our goals for tonight. This is the last you're going to see of me. I really want to jump into this presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and screen share at this point our presentation, and hopefully you are about to see it. Okay. So I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to kind of check on the chat a little bit. Good. I see lots of people coming in. We've got people from everywhere. North Dakota, California, Illinois. This is great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. All right. So let's jump in. In terms of standards-based grading, this section we're going to talk about what is it and why should we use it, and how does this then translate to the arts. All right, so what is standards-based grading? First of all, there's three main focuses. That's it. It's an approach to assessment that focuses on the content, on the skills that they need to be able to use or to work through that content, and the standards that students must learn. So the big focus of this whole idea of standards-based grading is that you're looking at students' mastery level of a standard, of a specific standard, not of a cumulative grade. So rather than working through a project, let's say we're doing a weaving project, and you might typically give 1 grade at the end of that project for the project in its entirety. Instead, you're going to break that project out into the standards that you focused on during that unit, and what students scored in each standard within the entire project so that students can see, hey, I did really well on my craftsmanship, but the organization I had a little bit of difficulty with. So you're breaking it apart so students, parents, teachers, they can all take a look at it and see exactly where the areas of struggle is. Now, that provides a really nice snapshot of student learning for each standard discretely, rather than having this lump grade at the end. So when a student comes to you and they get a C on something that they're on a project that they worked on, and they don't understand why they got the C, or their parent comes in and says, my child does great in this arts area. How in the world did they get a C on this? You can kind of break that apart with standards-based grading and say, well, this piece here, or these several pieces here, they did a lower quality of work on, and so we need to focus on those particular standards. Now, this is a piece that sometimes really causes a lot of frustration, especially for arts educators. Intangibles that are not distinctly a part of the standard, like how much time the student has been in class, their effort, their participation level, cannot be included in the grade in this kind of an approach. There are ways that we can take a look at that and see where it authentically fits. And I know that that is something of a struggle for a lot of us when you're only seeing students for a limited period of time anyway. In a good year, we get to see them 29 times if you see students typically once a week. So, and if you're working in a semester-based system, even shorter than that. So if they miss time from class, that can be a real struggle, and we want that to affect their grade because we want to show them that you need to have time within the standard. But in this approach, it's really about, again, that mastery level towards a standard. So unless it's discretely a part of the standard, we cannot include it in this standards-based grading approach. Hold tight with me while we talk about some ways around that in just a little bit. All right, so why should we use this approach? Well, first of all, it's meant to help provide an alignment between the learning cycle. So you establish the learning goals you want your students to achieve, and then from that, you can create some clear assessments that align very authentically with those goals. And once students take those assessments, you can give really high quality feedback rather than, this huge project that we just did, you got this one grade. Instead, you can take a look and say, well, you did great here and not so hot here. It gives a much better feedback loop for students. It also allows students to have participation in the assessment process, because one of the ways that you can use standards-based grading is to have a student portion so that they're assessing themselves and being able to go back and kind of monitor themselves. I did this on this standard and I did this on this standard, and I can show improvement over time, or I can show for myself where I'm still struggling. So it gives them more empowerment for their own grade. It also helps to streamline that prickly student learning objective or student growth objective process that many of us are in right now. So when you're taking a look at developing these growth objectives that are now required for teacher evaluation systems, you're selecting a standard which students typically struggle with. When you're using a standards-based grading approach, you can very easily see and use that data of, gee, a lot of my students are struggling with this standard in multiple project areas. That should be a focus for my student learning objective. So when your administrator is asking you about the data that supports the learning objective that you're choosing to focus on, you have that data immediately available to you when you're using a standards-based grading approach. So those are some of the reasons why we should be thinking about this. What does that mean for the arts, though? This kind of an approach is a bigger focus on using the standards as a base for the assessment process. So it's kind of timely that we now have the new national arts standards that have been released. And while they are voluntary and many states are reviewing them and kind of going through their own process of, should we adopt these standards? Should we adapt these standards? Should we just stick with what we already have? It's a conversation that's going on at almost every single state level about what arts standards we should be using at this point. And so since there is that focus on the standards, this provides a great way to kind of weave into that and to utilize that focus very well. It also means that we need to have detailed levels of proficiency and mastery. So no longer can we just say it's mastery level because I said it's mastery level. We need to have a very descriptive understanding and kind of a level platform. If you're working in a district with multiple arts teachers at every grade level, or at high school, middle school, elementary, let's say that you're in a county system, for instance, where you could have hundreds of elementary art teachers or middle school music teachers, you need to have a consistent level of what proficiency means and what mastery means in order to be able to use this approach. It also means we need to be thinking about smart writing. So when you're writing the criteria for those proficiency and mastery levels, it needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. If you can stick with those 5 pieces, the smart writing pieces, when you're writing both the assessments and your criteria, you're going to be much more successful in a standards-based grading approach. And finally, it's going to require us in the arts to really think through how to provide differentiation with a valid scale of measurement. How do you differentiate when you're using this kind of an approach with hundreds of students possibly that you're seeing? How can you do that and still maintain your sanity? These are questions we need to think about. One of the things I love on the right-hand side of your screen, and one of the questions I get a lot, especially from secondary educators, is when you have a project that your students are working on and you have those students in your classroom who are just above and beyond. They're gifted in this particular arts area. What's to say when you set your levels of mastery, they've already hit the mastery level, right? So then they're like, well, what else do I need to do? And they throw up their hands and it's kind of apathetic. So the chart on the right, what I love about this is that it places the criteria in the center. You have however many pieces of criteria you're looking at, and the achievement of that mastery level for that criteria. And then on both sides, it takes a look at, okay, if you're an advanced student, what is evidence of exceeding those standards? And how do you go above and beyond that? And then on the left, what are some areas that you still need work on? Because we all need work. It's never finished. And I think that's something that our gifted students really have a challenge with, is that, they think they're done, and there's always so many things that they could look at or extend upon. So this kind of a chart really helps with that and helps them to move further. It's a great differentiation tool. So I just kind of wanted to point that out for a second when we're talking about differentiation. All right, now before we move into the process itself, I just kind of want to take a look at the chat and see if there are any questions thus far. If you have any, please start putting them in there, because we've just kind of laid the groundwork, and I know I've gone fairly quickly in there. So feel free to add any questions, and kind of the slide is blurry. Sorry about that, but hopefully it kind of got a little bit more clear as we were moving on. Again, remember, tonight is about the information, trying to gather that. And if you need these, we also have the resource guide later on. All right, so keep going. We're going to talk about how do you do this. Now that we know what it is, that we're really focusing on grading specific to the standards, now we're going to start to talk about what does this look like? How do we actually put this into practice? Now, this looks overwhelming. Let me break it down. You're going to want to start with a scale, and it looks very much like a rubric. In fact, if you can think of a lot of this in terms of rubrics, which as arts educators, we're actually much better at than a classroom teacher or a content-focused teacher might be, because they're so used to the typical percentage scale. And when we're using a rubric, it's more natural for us to do so. So this part might actually be a little easier. On the left-hand side are the scores, which are teacher-driven. So we have the level 4, which is that they can go beyond what was directly taught in class. This is really for our advanced learners. This is, they can walk in the door and already have the skill. What can they do to go beyond what we're teaching them already? Move down one. A 3 is that they can do all of the basics and all of the complex and vigorous tasks. Right? So they can do everything that we've asked, and they can do the tough stuff that we've asked, right? So this is for those learners that are they're mastering the level. Number 2 is that they can do all the basics, okay? But they haven't been able yet to do those complex and vigorous pieces that a level 3 would get you. And 1 is that they can do most of the basics with assistance. A level 0 is that they're showing no evidence of learning whatsoever. Now, I know a lot of people who use the standards-based grading approach that advocate for kicking the 0 out. I actually like to keep it in there, because this is where those kids that are apathetic, that come in, that don't do anything, or that have missed class, or there is no evidence of them learning, I keep that in there for that purpose. And I also keep that in there because it allows me to have a conversation then with the parent, with the student, with my administrator, so that I can demonstrate, all right, here's why they're getting that level. All right. Now, in the middle, that's the Marzano scale recommendation. This is what he recommends that number 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0 translates to in terms of a percentage. So for elementary grades, they're in the center. So if I'm an elementary teacher and I'm looking at a 4, that's roughly translated into a 100 to a 90%, and so on and so forth on down the line. The blue bar is really meant for middle and high school when they need that 0.5 that comes in on the scale. So a 4 is 100%, perfect, out of the park. A 3.5 would translate to a 95%. So this gives you a little bit more wiggle room. I know some elementary people who really love that as well. Certainly you can use that when they're kind of in the middle of, well, they did really well. They could do some of the complex and vigorous tasks, but they couldn't do them all. So I'm going to give them, a 2.5 rather than a 3. This just gives you some flexibility in the numbers a bit. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, the level of mastery, that's student-driven. So the scores that are received are teacher-driven. That's based upon our criteria. The level of mastery is based upon whether the student-driven piece of what they understand and what they're showing based on the standard. So a 4 would mean that to them, they can self-identify that my work shows that I understand the content and skills completely, support my ideas with evidence, and express myself in this medium from my unique perspective. They got to be able to show all of that in their project, process, everything in the unit that you're working on in order to hit that mastery level. And then so on and so forth. So this really becomes about me as a learner. I can kind of self-assess, but also understand the translation to the score. Okay, so that's what this scale means, and I think that's really important, because if you're asking students to take ownership of part of this process, they need to understand what the numbers mean. So often our students get a 95% or a 4 or a B, some random letter or number, and to them it doesn't translate. It doesn't have any meaning other than I did good or I did great. And what does that mean? And so those levels of mastery are really critical for them to be able to move forward in their own learning. All right, so once you have the scale down, once you understand, all right, what a 4 is, what a 3 is, etc., how do you go about teaching with this? So my suggestion is always to start with a series of topics. Take a look at your scope and sequence. Take a look at what you want to accomplish during the year. What units do you want to focus on? If you're working on a drumming unit and you do that every February, or if you're doing the weaving unit, or if you're taking a look at a set of movements, or anything that you're working on, when does that happen? And look at that over your scope and sequence, and then think about within each of those units, what standards are you covering? And what's nice about the new national standards is that you can combine a lot of those standards into one project. So you're not doing, one standard here, one standard over here, and you're not doing that. You've got multiple standards that you're teaching within a project or a process. So it's already kind of helpful for you if you're using the national standards as your boilerplate. If you're not, you're still doing that. You just don't realize it possibly at the time. Take a look at your units and then chunk your standards together in those units or series of topics that you're already doing. Then once you have that done, and so simply, really, you're taking a look at that scope and sequence and you're just listing in each of those units what standards you're covering, then think about in that unit, start with your level 3. What complex skills or ideas do your students need to have for each of these topic areas? So if I'm focusing on a unit of study, what are the skills or ideas that my students need to have for each of those standards that I've identified that I'm going to be teaching? That's a level 3. Then you're going to backwards map to a level 2. What foundational skills do the students need to have in order to achieve the 3? Once you've identified that, then you're going to teach through that progression. Now you've identified, okay, my students need to have these foundational skills first, and then in order to be able to achieve the 3, and that way when they're working through the project, I'm really looking for them to get to the 3, and if they can extend beyond that, they get to the 4. How do I need to teach in order to get them those foundational skills and then to the complex ideas? That's how you start to work through your lesson. So you're really backwards mapping the whole process. All right. Now, from there, this then would be what your map looks like. All right, so let me break this down because this is a complex chart. And again, this is in our resource guide, both as this example and also as a template for you to work on. But I'm going to use this as an example so that you can see where we're going and kind of break this out. Let's say that I'm going to do a unit of study on world drumming in my music class in grade 5. All right, and we've got visual art examples later on. We've got lots of different ways that you can approach this, but this is what I'm going to focus on for right now. I know in my class, my world drumming unit is going to take me about 3 to 4 weeks to get done. So you see how I'm really focusing on this big topic area, right? Within that unit of drumming, the standards that I'm going to identify right away that I'm going to be focused on are in 3 different levels. My core goal, which is here's what my students have to walk away knowing after 3 to 4 weeks of drumming with me. They absolutely have to have this standard down. And for me, that's demonstrate and explain how the expressive qualities like dynamics, tempo, articulation are used in performers and personal interpretations to reflect expressive intent. Essentially, I want them to understand how to express themselves using the drum. That's my core goal. Then I have an intermediate goal. If we can accomplish the core goal and we get through that maybe in week 1, where would I want to go next? My intermediate goal is that my students will be able to demonstrate and explain, citing evidence, how responses to music are informed by the structure. So now I'm taking, okay, now you can make a personal statement with it. How do you respond to that, and how do you find evidence of that response to justify your response, right? That's my intermediate goal. So I'm bumping up that rigor just a little bit. Now my advanced goal, if I can get through those 2, the last piece I want them to do is to demonstrate selected and developed musical ideas for improvisations, compositions, and arrangement to express their intent and explain the connection. So essentially, I want them to be able to take what they've learned from core goal and from my intermediate goal and be able to apply it. That's my advanced goal. Okay, so and see how they're based within the standards. These, by the way, are standards from the National Core Art Standards, but you would use whatever it is that your district is using right now. What's helpful about splitting it into my core goal, my intermediate goal, my advanced goal is that it gives me room to move, because like right now, my daughter had a 1 hour early dismissal today because of snow. And if I was her music teacher today and I was supposed to have her, suddenly I've now missed her. And what if I missed her 3 weeks in a row, like my poor daughter has missed music 3 weeks in a row? I might not get to my advanced goal, but that's okay, because I've given myself the flexibility to have a core goal and an intermediate goal. If all I get to is that core goal, that's the meat of the curriculum that I really want to hit strongly. So I'm still feeling comfortable with that. It gives me a way to kind of breathe a little bit within my curriculum. All right, now once you have those kind of sketched out, you'll notice that I've color coded them. So I've listed them over on the left-hand side towards the bottom. And across in the middle, here's what I've got: skills or ideas needed for a developing score, a proficiency score, and a mastery score in each of the tiered goals. So in my core goal, here's what developing looks like. They can identify changes in rhythms, dynamics, and tempo. A proficiency level, a level 3, is that those students in that core goal can explain the effect of the changes in those elements. And a mastery is that they would be able to demonstrate a variety of ways of using the instruments, their voice and bodies, to change the dynamics, rhythms, and tempo. So again, it bumps it up, and I'm being very specific about what those levels are, and it's aligned to each of my goals for that unit. Now, I might have 10 different units for grade 5, and I would do this for every unit in a standards-based grading approach. That feels really overwhelming. So here's my suggestions for dealing with that. 1, you either select a single grade to focus on for using standards-based grading and develop these over time, and then next year do another grade plus this one, so that you're building on top of that. Or you select a series of units from each of the classes or grades that you teach. So select 3 from grade 5 and 3 from grade 4 and 3 from grade 2, or 2 of your advanced classes that you're teaching at the secondary level, whatever it may be. Take a smaller chunk. Don't try to do it all at once, because to try and do this kind of mapping for all of your grades is going to make you want to just run screaming for the hills. So don't do it. Take a smaller piece and do it really well, and then add more over time. All right. Let me just check. If you have questions about the topic, the unit kind of template that we've talked about here, please put them in there so that we can see that. Okay. I'm seeing questions about the copies of the slides. Anything about this particular topic, go ahead and add that in there. And I know that you're on somewhat of a delay, so don't worry, I will come back and answer some questions, but please do add questions to that, to the chat, because I will come back and answer some of them as we go on. I know that this particular piece is a lot to take in, but this is really very, very helpful once you understand the color coding, and I would highly recommend doing that. So I'm going to show you how coming up. All right, once you have that kind of outline, now you need to start creating your assessments. So create your rubrics or your questions that you want to use for the end of the unit in advance. And go back to how you've organized your topic and your original standards. Think about, all right, what questions am I going to put on this rubric? What are my criteria that I'm going to put on there that I'm going to rate as a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or a 1, so that my students for each of these standards that I've selected. So if my third period class, I got all the way through to my advanced goal, but my second period class, I only got to my intermediate goal, I'm going to use rubrics for those standards. I only have two rubrics for my second period class or my fourth period class, and I've got 3 for my third period class because I was able to get through the advanced goal. You need to create the assessments before you teach the lesson, because you can't teach the lesson if you don't know where you're going. But before you create the assessments, you have to have this done. So that's why this is first, and then you take a look at this to create the assessment questions that you're going to use for the finished project or process that you're using. Be sure to look for your verbs. If you're using, if the standard says analyze or create or perform, then you need to have an assessment that will reflect that, and you have to teach your students how to do those things. So if I go back here, and my standards all say demonstrate. My students need to be able to show me that. They have to demonstrate it. They can't just identify something. They have to actually demonstrate it. So what does that look like in my assessment? Make sure that you're paying attention to those verbs that are utilized in the standards. All right, now for our visual art friends, as an example, I wanted to show you what a rubric might look like based in the standards. So these were the constructs that I wanted to measure on a project. Now what's nice, you can develop individual rubrics if you want for each topic that you're going to use. Or you can use a set of rubrics that are based upon big ideas like development of ideas, organization, or clarity of presentation. I like to use the big buckets, and typically I have about 6 big buckets that I use, and then plug the standards into where they fit. So my rubrics stay fairly the same. The wording doesn't change very much. I can finagle things here or there depending upon the project itself. But my rubrics don't change a whole lot. What does change is the standards that I'm measuring. So I can plug in development of ideas. This is going to be National Standards for Visual Arts, CR 2.1.8. I'm taking a look at a second grader at this point. So this is going to be, I can plug my standards in there for each of these big buckets. And I may only want to look at 2 of those. I may only want to look at development of ideas and organization. Maybe presentation was not something that I really wanted to take a look at for this particular project. But I mean, that's totally up to you. Now, here's what each of the scores would look like. So based upon this standard, the student composition in a 4 addresses the theme and provides effective and comprehensive development of the topic or artistic elements by using clear purpose, details, embellishment. The development is consistently appropriate to the task, purpose, and audience. It is a very specific, measurable piece that defines a score of 4 for that particular standard CR 2.1.8. You'll notice that each of the scores are directly related to that standard. But again, because I'm using the big bucket of development of ideas or organization or clarity of presentation, I can fit those standards in. These big buckets are coming from your anchor standards. So if you take a look at those overarching anchors and then all of the standards that fit underneath of them, if you can develop a rubric for the big anchors, for each of the big anchors and what a 4, 3, 2, or 1 looks like, you could then plug in the standards that fall underneath of that anchor. And this will then tweak these as you put them into your rubrics so that you're not completely rewriting a rubric every single time you have a new project. All right, but I did want to show you what that looks like in terms of a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1. All right, now I'm going to go back really quickly, check in for some questions. Let's see. So the A, B, C at the top with the core and intermediate gets confusing. It feels like a grade for, and what's the purpose for the A, B, C? Let me go back to that. So you can label these anything you want. You can take out A, you can take out B, you can take out C. I like using the term core goal, intermediate goal, advanced goal. This is the tiering system. It's a tier. So this gives you the flexibility of how much you can get done. So if you miss students, you've got the core goal. That's the main thing you need to focus on. If the only thing you get to is your core goal with the amount of times that you see your students, then you're happy with that. That's your base for happiness. The intermediate goal is what you would like to achieve if you've seen your students enough times, you think that you can get them to the next goal for that project. You could have, that's where your second standard comes in. That would make you kind of, satisfied and beyond happy. And then your advanced goal would be the thing that you would be over the moon if you could get all of this done in your project, right? So the reason I like this at the top is that it provides you with that flexibility that because we are arts specialists, we see our students less than everybody else. It's a fact, and it's not fair, but it's something that we have to deal with. And especially when we have things thrown at us like, an assembly or an inclement weather day, or somebody had to stay late, you missed this class, or, God forbid somebody got sick. You got sick and needed to stay home and take care of yourself. Shocker! This gives you some room to move so that if you don't get to the intermediate or the advanced goal, it's okay because the students have that core knowledge that you really want to get out of from this project. That's the intention of the top piece. All right. Now, how do you manage all of this? This is really tough because, especially for arts educators, when you're working with standards-based grading, you've got hundreds of students, whereas a content specialist or a grade level teacher may only have 30, which I'm not downplaying, because trust me, 30 of any grade level is a challenge. But if that's a case, you've got 30 kids. If I'm a third grade teacher and I've got 30 kids, that's a lot different than having 650 K-5. So how do you manage standards-based gradings with hundreds of students and then thinking about what's the next step in this process? So the first thing you need to do, the first part, is preparing yourself. And that means creating that topic, scope, and sequence. Thinking about, okay, what are my units of study? That's that piece that I showed you with world drumming that had the tiers and then the proficiency levels. Creating that for your units. And remember, I said take a smaller bite. Take a much smaller bite. Don't try to do all of the classes that you teach all at once. So pick a grade, pick a set of units, whatever it is, and create your topic, scope, and sequences. And then add in the standards, your tiers at the top, and your levels. That's a major piece to get done. When you're doing this, I highly recommend that you put it in a Google Doc. If your school uses Schoology, use that because they have the standards already there. All you have to do is click the standards that you want to have put in, so you don't have to go back and forth looking and copying and pasting. That's a really nice feature if your school has Schoology or another digital format that your school already uses. There's lots of them out there. I just picked Schoology as an example. But do this in a digital format for easy access. If your school has nothing, use the Google Doc and use it as a spreadsheet, because it will be easier to copy, paste, translate, kind of move things around, and it's also easier for collaboration. If you're working with other arts educators in your district, if you're looking at it from a personal learning group, so if you are working on a Facebook group. I know that the art teachers group is out there. There's music ed teachers group out there. There's lots of Facebook groups who share those kinds of things. This is helpful because then you can share the same document. So I really highly suggest doing that scope and sequence in a digital format. And then create your rubrics for each topic that you're going to be looking at before you teach the lesson, and also keep those digitally as well. So keep them in the same spot so you have ease of access. But those rubrics are going to help you when you go to teach the lesson, because in your mind you're going to be thinking about, okay, what's the core skill I got to get my kids to be able to do? And then what am I going to be grading them on, so that you can really focus and zero in your lesson to ensure that they're going to be successful. Once you have that preparation piece done, then you move to gradebook setup. So I like to do this on my own. Some people have PowerSchool. They have lots of different grading software that they have to use for their school. For me, if my school is requiring a standards-based grading approach, I like to create this in my own kind of spreadsheet. I can do this for myself very easily, but what I want you to take a look at is the format. So in my gradebook, I just finished up a weaving project, and I gave the weaving assessment, which was a rubric based on the project that they completed. In that weaving project, I was looking for 3 distinct standards: 2.1.4, 2.3.4, and 5.1.4. And so that it's not one big grade, right? So I can see that. Now, the level, this is where I think the question came in about being confused. If this is confusing to you, A, C, B, A, take that out and put in core, put in intermediate, and put in advanced. If that makes more sense to you, do that. For me, I just label it as A, B, C, because I see that in my mind. But this lets me know, okay, the first standard that I had them working on in that project that I was grading them on, that's my core. That's the core goal. That was the most important one to me. If they accomplished the second standard there for weaving, CR 2.3.4, that's an advanced goal that I had. If they get that, that's awesome. And the third one is my intermediate goal. All right, so I have 3 distinct grades for the weaving project. And then I have my periods listed and my students for each period and what they scored for each of the standards within the weaving unit. So each of those scores constitutes a grade. And then I would do the same thing. You see masks has the same thing. On masks, I was just looking for 1 standard. I only wanted them to focus on that. And so then what did they score for that 1 standard? When I put the dates up top, that lets me know that this is all one project. So I've got, that was scored on the 20th. All 3 of those was scored on the 20th because it goes with the 1 project. And I also like using color coding because that's just me. I'm very, very particular about that, and it helps me visually kind of see where everybody is. Now, I want you to notice some of these scores. If I take a look at period 1, student B, across the board here, they scored a 3 for the first standard in weaving and for the second standard, but they got a 1 on that third standard, which was an intermediate goal for me. I need to go back and chat with that student and kind of take a look at where were they in their process? Where did the breakdown occur? What's nice about this approach is that you can very easily go across the board and figure out where are your students in danger? Where are the standards that they're missing? Do I need to, as a teacher, go back and focus on a specific standard in a different project because they're always getting that standard, they're always scoring lower there? If so, I need to really hone in on that standard and maybe focus just on that one in my next project. This gives you kind of a great snapshot of where your students are truly struggling. And I hope you can see how this would tie in with student growth goals and the student learning objectives, because that data piece that I talked about in the beginning and being able to justify, here's why I chose this particular objective, because my students are scoring this way on my standards-based approach. It just kind of ties easily into that process. This is not difficult to set up because once you've got your topic out, you could set up your gradebook immediately. You can just plug in, copy, paste, and the only thing you would need to put in then are the scores. So I like to get this done ahead of time as well. Get all of those pieces plugged in, the kind of the units that I'm going to be working on, the standards, etc., because I've already got them set up in my topic unit outline that I did for my scope and sequence. Once you get through that, now comes the part where you're empowering your students. So in order for students to take ownership and to feel like they want to do more and want to push themselves to the next level, they need to understand what their grade means. So you need to clearly establish and communicate what that scale looks like, and share scores with your students. If you have time, which many of you are laughing at your computer screens right now, ha ha ha, what is that, time? I know that some teachers like to give students their scores and allow them to track them over time. So to kind of give them a spreadsheet at the very beginning, or even email that home and allow them to plug in their own scores that they receive back, so that they can kind of follow along and go, oh, I'm really having difficulty here. I don't necessarily think that's a must do. I think that's a nice if you have time for it. But I do believe that you need to share the scores with your students so that they can kind of get that immediate feedback. And when you're giving them a scale of what does your grade mean, use I can statements for the standards or what they've known. Make it personal to them. So I gave an example over here of what that would look like if I used the 0.5 scale. So a 4 would be if I mastered the skill and showed that I can use it. 3.5, I proved I definitely know this skill. A 3, I know the skill, but I made a small mistake, etc. Okay. What I like is at the bottom, when we've got the 1 and the 0, we've got ask for help. So a 1 is I tried the skill, but it wasn't on the right track for me. Ask for help. That is a reminder for me as a 1. I need to go and ask my teacher for help for that. Or a 0, I didn't complete the project. I need to ask for help right now. When you put this in a very visible place and you constantly reference it, it internalizes for your students and they become aware of what that score means, and they can internalize that and move forward with their artistic skill. All right. Now's the time for questions. We've got 45 minutes of really intensive work. I did promise you that I had a little surprise at the end. I really kind of wanted to give you something that you could go and get this handout, this resource at even a bigger discount than just $15. So you can get 15% off if you want to go purchase the handout that you saw tonight. If that's of interest to you, you can get 15% off using the coupon code NEWS15, 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 all in one. So when you check out, there's a place for a promo code. Put that in, and you'll get 15% off the item. If you want it to be that, if you want it to be our online conference, which we have coming up on February 7th, you can get 15% off of that. Anything you want in our online store. I just kind of wanted to extend an offer to you, just as my thank you for coming tonight and kind of listening about this approach. And that's why I didn't want you to get the guide right away, because I wanted you to make sure you had the coupon code before you did that. All right, while I do that, I would like to see if there's any questions that you've got. It looks like some of you were having trouble with the blurriness. That is that's a broadband issue wherever you're at. If you can refresh the screen, that will help. Let's see. I feel that if the standard is not listed specifically on the report card, then the number or labels is basically the same as letter grading. Okay. So that's where the rub really comes in, right? That if report cards are not switching yet to a standards-based grading report card, which a true standards-based grading report card has the standards listed, and then parents can identify, okay, where did my students leave off? So the labels of mastery, proficiency, emerging is a letter grade. If we go back to that Marzano scale, if we go back to that slide, for the slide recommendation, you are translating that to a letter grade if the report card has not yet gone to a standards-based approach. So that's a communication piece. What I like to do, and I've been in this situation where we've shifted to a standards-based grading model, but the report card has not yet reflected that. So it's still an A, a B, a C, a D. So we've still got this stigma of the letter grade. What I like to do is send home a communication that explains this, and I take out the 4, I take out the scores of the teacher-driven piece here, and I leave the scale recommendation of 100 to 90%, or 100 to 95, 95 to 90, 89 to 80, etc. I leave that, and I leave the level of mastery so that parents and students can see, what does the letter grade mean? What does level of mastery mean when you're working towards that standard? Because it's a frustrating process. You're working through standards and it's not translated on that report card. So that's a matter of shifting those report cards over. Okay, anything else? Any other questions that we have? I'm going to kind of wait just a second because I know we're on that delay, and I want to make sure that we go ahead and answer those if you have questions going on. Okay, let me go back to that questions page. Oh, one other thing, I told you that in the resource guide, we do have those templates. So you'll see that I've got those templates laid out for you so that you can see what those look like. That's in that resource guide, but you don't need that if you were working on just kind of understanding the information tonight. If you do have questions outside of tonight, my email address is right there. It's very easy, susan@educationcloset.com. My telephone number, which is my direct line, 443-821-1088. I encourage you to reach out, ask me questions. I'm happy to answer. In fact, we did one of these back in November for student learning objectives, which is also archived on the site. Somebody just emailed me today and said, could you take a look at these statements that I created based on that presentation? And I just sent him some feedback today. So you are welcome to contact me at any time. I'm happy to assist or to provide more clarification if that's something that you need. I'm going to stay on the chat. I'm going to close out the window in just a minute. I'm going to stay on the chat for the next 5 to 10 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. And at 9 o'clock, I'm going to close out. And within an hour, you should receive your professional development, the link for your professional development certificate that you can print out and put in your name on that certificate. So feel free to use that. If you don't receive it, please do email me and we can get that to you within the next couple of hours so that you have it for yourself. And remember that we do offer these once a month. So I encourage you, if there's anything that you have questions about, we'd love to focus on whatever it is that you need. So if you have feedback in those items, please let us know. We really do want to help you with this series, with questions that you might have or issues that you're running into, particularly in terms of the arts. So with that, it has been my pleasure to be with you this evening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to learn about standards-based grading through the arts. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, just let me know. I'm happy to help. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.